Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here with us tonight for the Ward 9 virtual town hall ward meeting. My name is Kieran McKenzie. I'm the councillor for Ward 9, and I really do appreciate everybody who's here with us tonight, and looking forward to having a wonderful conversation about what's happening in our ward and in our community, and taking your questions and unpacking all of that. So before we get started, I do want to start with a land acknowledgement. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. The City of Windsor honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Additionally, for folks who are primarily French speaking, I am officially bilingual et je peux prendre, quand on sera au moment où on prend des questions, je peux prendre des questions en français pour ceux qui veulent demander leurs questions en français. Et bonjour à tout le monde, mes amis franco-ontariens, francophones qui sont ici avec nous aujourd'hui. I'd also like to thank all of our administration and staff. It's a tremendous amount of work to put a meeting like this together in the format that we're doing it, under any format, frankly, but doing it this way has added a new layer of challenge for our administration, and I think they've done incredible work working through these processes and making someone like myself feel very comfortable about what it is that we're going to undertake over the next hour or so. I'd like to introduce, and I'll open the floor for both Mayor Jude Dilkins, who is with us this evening, and also our CAO, new CAO, Jason Rayner. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here with us. Your Worship, I'd invite you to offer some comments now if you'd like. I do have a presentation that I'm going to make. Maybe you'd like to see the presentation and offer your comments afterwards. I'll leave it up to you.
This is your show, so I'll follow your lead, Councillor, but I'm here to take any questions people might have as well.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll get started. Sandra, if you could share the PowerPoint presentation. So for folks who have been would have attended our last in-person meeting, this may be somewhat familiar. This is an updated version of the PowerPoint presentation that I did at our first ward meeting. Actually, before I get into this, let me just sort of unpack the rest of the agenda. I'll do my presentation here. Afterwards, the mayor will offer some comments. Then we'll open up the floor to questions. We'll try to get through all of the questions. You can participate by either raising your hand using the raise hand function to indicate that you want to ask a question and when your turn comes up, your microphone will be unmuted and you'll be able to ask your question. For those that don't want to ask a question in that format, there's also you have the opportunity to type in a question. If you look at the bottom of your screen and there's an icon Q&A, you can type in a question, click on that icon, a text box will open up and you can type in your question there. And I'm going to do my best to get through as many questions as we have. Technically speaking, we have about an hour this evening, but if we need to go a bit longer or a bit past that, certainly happy to do that. But I'm going to do my best to keep the discussion moving along so that everybody does have the opportunity to ask their question. So, having set all of that up and getting into the PowerPoint presentation now. So again, welcome to the meetings. Andrew, if you could go to the next slide, please. So a couple of things. So we'll start with the council highlights, and you see in the background, there's a picture of how we've been meeting over the last 18 months or so, which is by Zoom. So we've been conducting all of the business aside from, I think there was one meeting where we did have the opportunity in the middle of the pandemic to attend in person. But other than that, we've been meeting in this format. Frankly, I enjoy the in-person format much more, but the pandemic being what it is has brought us to having to leverage these tools in order to be able to conduct the business of the city. Some of the highlights Obviously, at the very top of the agenda for the council and for the community, frankly, and maybe even the entire world, has been how do we collectively move together through a pandemic and a global health crisis, and that's brought forward a number of very challenging decisions that we've been forced to make with respect to service delivery, and just how it is that we do our best to keep folks in the community safe and healthy as we're experiencing a global health crisis. And that's brought a number of decisions, and I know some folks have some very strong opinions about some of the decisions that were made, as do I. But I can promise you that every single decision and the position that was taken, whether it was by the administration or an individual councillor or any elected official or any person in our city civic administration, has always been at the core of that decision, has been what is the best thing for us to do to keep people safe and healthy. And again, as I said, folks can disagree with what the decisions that were made on any one particular measure, but those decisions have been extremely challenging, and I can promise you that there is nobody who is working inside these walls at City Hall or in the community on behalf of the city that takes any of these decisions lightly. They're challenging, they're tough, but I'm really proud of the work that we've done collectively to do our best to sort of manage the crisis in our community. Obviously, beyond that, the business of the city continues. We still deliver services. We still have to manage the infrastructure, flooding, and we've stayed the course with respect to improving our sewers and our roads. We continue to make infrastructure investments a very high priority. We're doing everything in our power to address the flooding issues that are happening across the community, and in particular in Ward 9. There's some I expect that there'll be some questions about that, so I don't want to unpack that too much right now, but we are continuing to make very strong and serious investments with respect to the infrastructure in the community. Obviously, climate change is council passed it over the course of this term, a climate change adaptation mitigation plan called Degrees of Change, and literally we're taking a climate change lens to virtually everything that we do as a city. We're applying that, and it's now embedded in our decision-making process around programs and services, as well as infrastructure investments, and you're going to continue to see that happening over the short, medium, and long term. Public transit is another area where this council's taken some very strong steps to improve that service in the community. And one of the things you might have heard the mayor and even myself and other councillors talking about is the Windsor Works document, which is I think a really crucial document that we dealt with a few months back, where we're looking at the long-term economic future of our community. And I think that's with what we're seeing happening in the manufacturing and automotive sector in particular, that was outlined in what is outlined in that document is more critical than ever in order for us to look at different ways where we can grow and diversify the economy and continue to make Windsor a place where people are able to live and work and raise a family and do all of those things that we've been able to do, that many of us have done for a very long time. And Windsor Works is a vision document that's going to help us to sort of secure the future over the next several decades to come. We are making investments in the housing, and there's an emergency shelter proposal that council has recently passed. So we're addressing the housing shortages and homelessness and poverty in the community as well. And certainly we are continuing to make investments in improving and increasing public safety in neighborhoods and in the community generally. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges, as I mentioned, obviously the global health pandemic, and certainly, and I'll take this opportunity, we've, as a council, and also our public health officials are strongly recommending that people choose to vaccinate. Vaccination is the most important thing that a person can choose to do in order to keep themselves safe from the virus, as well as the people that are surrounding them. Obviously, there are other measures that people can undertake, social distancing, wearing a mask, and all of those other measures that people are well aware of. The Devonshire Mall still provides the opportunity for people to walk in and get vaccinated if they want to choose or want to make that choice. And once again, I think that is and this council has taken the promotion of vaccinations to the back lottery, and I see the mayor on a regular basis, and well as my council colleagues advocating for folks in the community to choose to vaccinate. And I think that is a good thing for folks to do. And I'm proud that our council is fully vaccinated, and that folks have chosen to take that step in their lives. So I also did talk about housing and homelessness crisis. We are making some very significant investments to address those challenges in the community. Recently, the Meadowbrook project is in full swing now, and we're looking forward to having that facility that's going to bring another 145 units into the housing universe. Many of them will be affordable housing units, and that facility will be providing wraparound supports for folks who need them. So that is a major investment, $32 million. As I understand it, that the City of Windsor is making in partnership with the province and the federal government. We are walking the walk in terms of trying to address the housing challenges that we're seeing in our community. The opioid crisis, yes, we're in the middle of a global health pandemic, but the opioid crisis is still ongoing. Recently, council or the Windsor Police chose to equip their officers with naloxone, which is an overdose antidote drug that helps people when they're in crisis or in an overdose situation. And we are bringing forward other programs and services that are helping people who are struggling with mental health and addiction. The asset management plan. So I have a heading there, aging and declining infrastructure, and that came. That was made very clear to us on council through a document that we dealt with called the Asset Management Plan, AMP for short. And what that has done is that's laid out a plan for council to be able to not only to sort of assess the condition of the assets that we currently are responsible for managing, everything from recreational facilities, libraries to roads, sewers, you name it. And it's put together a plan for us to be able to maintain that infrastructure over the long term. And I think council's adopted the plan that was set forward, that was put in front of us by administration, and we're following that plan, and we're going to be doing, I think, moving forward, a much better job of maintaining the infrastructure and the assets that we currently are responsible for managing. So I talked about improving services with transit as a for example, is one of the areas where we're making some very serious improvements in addressing climate change, and that is everything, as I said, through every program, service, and the infrastructure that we build, investments. We're applying that climate change lens to it, and just looking at ways that we can. And I think that there'll be some very interesting programs and proposals that'll come forward in the not too distant future for us to make even better strides to achieve our climate change goals, which is a very significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. Parks. So there's a lot of things here that folks will be aware of already. The newest, I'll just go over some of the newer investments that have happened over the last year or so. Patrick McGuire Park, we've seen solar lights, benches, and a trail resurfacing. Walker Home Site did have the trail resurfaced as well. There's a new playground there that's pictured in the background that's been there for over a year now. Solar lights, that was a ward fund investment that I made in that park, and we're going to be looking to do more, much more. And I'm going to have an announcement about solar lights in just a moment. Bike trails also have been resurfaced, and there's been drainage improvements, which might be good news for the baseball folks, because we might have some. We might be able to get to those diamonds in the hopefully not too distant future. We have Calderwood Park. As many people know, Circle Park, as some people refer to it, that's seen a really nice trail resurfacing as well. Just a note on that, there were some folks who expressed concern about the configuration of what the new trail was going to look like. And I really do want to thank James Chaco, our Parks Director, who, after I had a discussion with him, he talked to the contractors, and we actually were able to make some adjustments to the configuration of the trail to make sure that the quote unquote the Circle Park designation remained at least fairly accurate. I think now it looks like a lowercase q to some extent, but that circular part of the track is still basically a circle, and that's the result of some direct feedback from residents about what they were seeing happening in their park, and we responded So I'm pleased with that. And again, thank Mr. Chaco for taking that issue on. The other bullets, I think many folks would probably already know that some of those investments have gone forward in Hall Farm and Leafield Park and whatnot. So looking forward, and this again comes from some of the interaction that I've had directly with residents on issues. And Roseland Park is a really good example. There's a number of folks who live in that neighborhood. I call it the old Roseland neighborhood. That had expressed some concerns about the condition of Roseland Park. And in fact, I having lived in that neighborhood myself for several years, I was very aware of Roseland Park and frankly, the need to see some improvements there. The playground structure still is a few years out from being replaced. But what we were able to do, and again, this is working with residents and Mr. Chaco and some other folks in the Parks Department, and certainly Mr. Mansour, our new Director of Parks and Recreation, that we're going to have some improvements in Roseland Park coming forward in the very near future. The shade structure is going to be addressed, as well as a community soccer field is going to replace the diamond that is frankly aging and frankly not being very well used. And certainly there are future plans to do a full-blown redevelopment in that park, which would include things such as but subject to a public consultation process, trail, lights, benches, and other park amenities that the neighborhood would like to see happen in there. And scheduled actually for playground replacement 2022 and 2023, we have Kenilworth Park, Maple Leaf Park, and Patrick McGuire Park. All of those playground structures are aging, and I'm very happy to be able to report that we are going to see those replaced and upgraded in the very near future, or sorry, in the next year or two to come. Next slide, please. So some of the infrastructure priorities and some of these things, again, going back to the PowerPoint presentation I brought forward a couple of years ago, some of these things are still there, but there's been progress. And that's kind of why I wanted to sort of highlight some of these things, some of these items. Flooding and water management, we are making major investments to address flooding across the community. As many people know, with the sewer master plan, there is a study that is actually coming forward within a month or so to our Environment, Transportation, and Public Safety Standing Committee, or sorry, Environment, Transportation Standing Committee, that's going to deal with flooding issues in South Windsor, specifically in Ward 1, as well as the Devonshire Heights neighborhood area, where there is a cluster, I think it's fair to say, of folks who are experiencing basement flooding. So we're going to have a study that'll bring us a little bit closer to developing all of the solutions that need to be put in place in order to put an end to that. And we'll be talking a little bit more about flooding in a subsequent slide. Howard Avenue. So some good news on Howard. People would be aware that Howard is seeing a tremendous amount of development along and through that corridor. It was finally in 2021 that we have now finally seen the funding being allocated for the road improvements that need to be made through that corridor. I continue, and the mayor, I think, will corroborate if you were to ask him that nearly every time that I speak to him, there's three infrastructure pieces that come up on a regular basis. Howard Avenue, Walker Road, and 6th Concession are the three, I think, highest level priorities for us to address in terms of major infrastructure that needs to proceed. So the good news is Howard, we did get new sidewalks from South Cameron all the way up to Cabana. Those were well received, and very grateful for engineering to be able to sort of find the funds to be able to make that happen as well. And now, as I said, Howard has entered into the 10-year capital plan window, and a major project and we'll see what that is actually going to look like. There will be public meetings that will come where we'll have the opportunity to talk about what we would like to see through that corridor. So stay tuned for that. 6th Concession and the provincial road project is happening as we speak. We're going to be moving into phase 2 in the next construction season, and that will also bleed into, I guess is one way to put it, into the 6th concession project, which is actually already underway. It's 6th concession in North Talbot. Some of the drainage work is happening as we speak, but 6th concession, as folks know who live in the Walker Gate area, our neighborhood, as well as the folks who are on the Roseland side, 6th concession bisects those two neighborhoods and is very sorely needs some investments and some significant investments to be able to accommodate the amount of development that we've seen that's surrounding that particular road. And also infrastructure priorities, traffic calming. And I expect that there'll be some questions around traffic calming this evening. Some of the things that council has done, we are going to be getting and dealing with a report in I would say the spring of 2022, so just in a few months. That'll bring forward some new policies and procedures with which we're able to implement traffic calming solutions into neighborhoods. I'll just be frank, I think to some extent that that process is a bit onerous at this point. And I'm very glad that the review is happening and that we'll have an opportunity to sort of look at different ways that we can assess and perhaps expedite the implementation of traffic calming measures where they're appropriate to be made. So that's good news, and certainly there's more good news on that front. Recently, at council, we passed the temporary traffic calming measures, and there's a few neighborhoods in the region that I've been discussing with traffic planning and traffic operations about where we might want to see some of these temporary traffic calming measures implemented. It's not the full suite of measures that some folks might be hoping for in their neighborhoods, but there are some things that we are able to do in the short term and quickly to be able to improve public safety in people's neighborhoods with respect to the people perhaps not driving in as safe a manner as we might hope that they would. Next slide, please. So this is just for this is a hard slide to read, I think, for some folks, but this is just sort of and it's not even complete, but it's a list of all of the projects that we've seen in the ward or in the last few years. So suffice to say, there's a lot of work that's going on. Sometimes we don't notice all of the things that are actually happening. I was a little surprised putting this list together to see the number of different projects that are happening in the ward. Everything from a new fire hall, as you said, that on Provincial that came about a few years ago, to work that's being done to improve the sewer, the water management systems, some road improvements as well. So there's a lot of infrastructure investment that has happened in the ward over the last 3-4 years or so, and those are certainly going to continue as we move forward. Next slide, please. Okay, public safety plan for Ward 9. So again, one of the things, and I've had many discussions with Windsor Police and different folks in our administration about what we can do about addressing some of the public safety issues that we're seeing in our ward. I've spent a tremendous amount of time and I've learned a lot about the different things that we are able to do and the different programs and services that the City of Windsor will provide to and to support residents and to support the community in terms of being a safer place for everybody to live. Lights is the first thing that I think is that I'd like to A, highlight, and B, suggest that people look to do on their own properties and sort of advocate for in their own neighborhoods. For my own part, I have made ward funds available to light up some of our parks, and I'm going to continue to do that moving forward. Now might as well be the time. So there are a couple of nice investments that are going to happen through a ward fund investment, as well as I've been able to convince parks to find a little bit of money to make an investment in Devonshire Heights Park. The light there, as people know who live in the neighborhood, has been working and not working, on again, off again for quite some time now. We've decided that that light is going to be replaced, and we're going to bring the solar lights that you've seen along the pathway in the Walker Homesite Park, for example, and in other parks. We're going to be putting the solar lights in that park to light that park up, and we think that that'll be certainly an improvement from what we have there now. As well, there will be a ward fund investment in Calderwood Park, Circle Park. So we just got the new trail there, and come the spring, we will see solar lights added into that park. So for folks who like to use the trail and when it's dark and maybe walk their dog or whatnot, they'll be able to use that trail and use it safely. So I think we're going to see some nice investments there. The local improvement plan, there's a link here. So this is about this is for folks who live on streets that don't have street lights. There's certain components of infrastructure that are privately funded on your street. Sidewalks, street lights, some of the water management pieces. When we build a subdivision, that infrastructure is financed by the developers, and those costs are passed along to through the developer to the residents. So in the initial stages, for those that aren't aware, individuals actually pay for some of that infrastructure. Once it's in place, the city of Windsor does take on the responsibility to maintain the infrastructure. Street lights will be replaced once they're there, but if they're not there, we have to go through a local improvement plan process in order to bring those street lights to the streets in question. For anyone that, and I don't want to dig too deep into this one, but for those who are interested in going through the process to bring streetlights onto their street, if they don't have it, I'm certainly more than happy to be helpful in that respect to walk you through the process. And I would very, very strongly recommend that you engage that process. It is I think a really critical piece to improving public safety in neighborhoods. Streetlights is certainly, and there's plenty of data that supports all of that as well. And we have folks from the Safety Village here today, Melissa Lozon, as well as, forgive me, Chris Cookson, who, and the reason I mentioned them, they administer the Neighborhood Watch program, and we do have several streets in our ward that do have neighborhood watches that have been organized and implemented, and that again is another tool that can help to improve the public safety outcomes in neighborhoods. So I would definitely urge folks to look for that program. And if you do want additional information about how to create a neighborhood watch program in your own neighborhood, certainly please email me, reach out, and I would be more than happy to walk you through those processes to make that happen in your neighborhood. There's greater awareness in public education. So the reason I added that in is there are some things that individuals can do on their own property to address public safety in their homes and on their property. And some of it is adding lights. Some of it is being aware of the areas where people who might be looking to do some not so good things have the opportunity to hide. So it's just, and if folks want to be engaged in a process that can help them to understand where those vulnerabilities are. Again, I'll invite folks to message me about that. The police, Windsor Police Service does have an individual whose name is Barry Horban, who does safety by environmental design. I think I think I may have misquoted what his title is, but certainly what he does is he goes into neighborhoods and he looks at where some of the vulnerabilities might be and make some recommendations as to what individuals or groups, organizations might be able to do to improve, to make their properties more secure and more safe. So again, that's something that I'd be willing to help folks with if they're interested in understanding that. And then finally, it's, we need to continue to work to address root causes. Crime is directly and positively correlated to poverty. And so what you see happening at the City of Windsor, the mayor, myself, and my council colleagues, we are making investments to address poverty and homelessness in our community. And those investments not only are the right thing to do from a quote social justice standpoint, but they're also the right thing to do in order to address some of these challenges that we're having with respect to community public safety. So when you see some major investments that are happening, I hope folks understand that it's not just to sort of support folks who are in need, but it's also to support the entire community by making the community a better place for everybody. Next slide, please. The Devonwood Conservation Area, one of my favorite spots in our ward. So I've talked a lot about the Devonwood Conservation Area. That that space, we're doing something wonderful there already by protecting it. It is a property that is managed by the Essex Region Conservation Authority. But what I do know is the folks that know that space and use that space love it, and they love it for good reason. There are some folks who are starting to organize a community group around that, and I don't have much to update on that front at this point, but certainly I'm very happy to see that happen. I do want to support that in any way that I possibly can, and for the folks who are interested in joining, we'll call it, the working title of Friends of Devonwood type of a group, certainly is something that I'm happy to support and work with in order to really sort of push us to continue to maintain and just love that space. On another front, I've had conversations with many folks who were well aware in terms of the recreational services and library services that we don't have a library in our ward. And one of the things that was a key campaign commitment was that I would work to bring a library to Ward 9. That work is happening in earnest. Just recently, I'm happy to report that the Windsor Public Library Board, and I was very grateful, passed a feasibility study for a library concept to go forward. And this concept is connected to the Devonwood Conservation Area. That's why I brought it up here, where the library itself would have a nature focus. We still need to do a lot of work around where this facility might be sited, but the idea and the concepts behind it and the partners that could potentially be involved, those discussions are happening now. I'll just ask folks to stay tuned on that, but the process is well underway, and we'll look forward when the feasibility study actually goes forward to the Windsor Public Library Board, and you'll definitely hear me talking about this when that actually does go forward. I would expect sometime in the first quarter of the new year. Next slide, please. I already talked about this, the idea of poverty being everyone's business. And I think that's what I'm trying to emphasize there is that we need to support the investments that are moving forward to address poverty, homelessness, addiction, and mental health in our community. You see at the bottom there, I'll just highlight the statistic. And this is a statistic from, I think it's 2018. The cost of poverty in Ontario is $38 billion. That's a lot of money. And if you break that down into, it's millions of dollars in our own community. And that's why I think it's very important for us to make investments so that we're not responding to crises. We're rather being much more proactive in terms of dealing with the issues that emerge around poverty, generally speaking. Next slide. So that's it for my presentation. I hope I wasn't too long-winded with some of that, but what I'll do now is I'll invite Mayor Wilkinson if he'd like to offer some comments to chime in and speak to the folks. So Mayor Dilkins, take it away.
Well, Councillor, great presentation. Thank you for this. And you've covered so much. I can be extremely brief, which is great, and we can get to questions. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things and I guess reinforce one of the important things that you mentioned as well. And that was the Windsor Work strategy. And it's not lost upon myself, Councillor McKenzie, or any of the councillors, many of whom are on the phone on this call as well, watching. This is not lost upon us what just happened and the news that came out of Stellantis as they adjust with the global chip shortage and the impact that this is going to have on at least 1,800 families in our community, plus all of the feeder plants as they adjust in 2022. And so this city council, myself, administration, everyone on city council is unanimously behind Windsor Works. We approved the plan unanimously. We've got money in the budget. As soon as we approved it, it's there. And now the implementation plan is coming forward at the next meeting of council and talk so we can start implementing this and making sure that our economy, that our region is resilient, that we're able to look forward and pivot from becoming the auto capital of Canada to the automobility capital of Canada, which really is an important distinction when you think of how fast the sector is changing, and you see the big move to electrification and what that means for all of the auto companies, including our largest employer here. So we want to work in lockstep, and I'm really happy that council certainly gets it, and they're there to make sure that this economy, that our families can continue to be strong and thrive in this wonderful city that we have. I also wanted to talk just briefly about finances. And so all of the things that Councillor McKenzie talked about were really, really important, and they're all really good. But you should also know that from a financial perspective, despite the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic, that we worked very hard to secure funding that filled our deficit hole in 2020, and we brought the number down on the city side to, I would say, almost zero from city operations. We just have outstanding deficits at the tunnel and the airport, which are certainly, operations that are unique to this city, that we would be going after both the federal and provincial government to help make us whole so we can get through the pandemic together. And that has allowed us, and the reason I'm even mentioning it, is all of the things that Councillor McKenzie talked about and all the other councillors are going to talk about at their meetings requires money. And we have a 10-year, $1.6 billion capital plan. This year, $170 million being spent, 60% of that on roads and sewers. We are committed to this sewer master plan. It's a $5 billion plan. Will probably take decades to complete, but we recognize that all of the sewers underneath our feet probably took about 128 years to be built. So you can't change it overnight, but we are committed to this and we are allocating big money to make sure that that is a priority. And then I would just end on two things: the hospital being very important to the city, and the announcement yesterday. Of course, the hospital will be built in Ward 9, and the Premier was here with the Minister of Health yesterday to make the announcement of $10 million that allows the process to move forward. There will be more community engagement over the next 18 months to 24 months as David Mouche and the team work to implement phase 2, which is the $10 million, really the design of the hospital and how it will function. And so we're excited about that. And then I would just say thank you to all of you. I know this has been tough. This pandemic has been tough. Councillor McKenzie, I'm going to say Kieran, like this is a council meeting, but Kieran, because we're on an informal call here, talked about the effects of the pandemic and certainly some of the decisions that had to be made. And it's worth noting that none of these decisions are lost on any of us. We know that there are some hard things that we had to do to get through, always done with the best interest of the residents in mind, even if it impacted you in a negative way. We were thinking of the population as a whole, but I really feel optimistic that we're getting to a good point. Our vaccination numbers are getting higher each and every day, and we're encouraging everyone to get vaccinated. The vaccines are formally approved by Health Canada now, so they are safe. And I think it's probably just a matter of time before they're approved for the 5 to 11-year-old age category as well, which will really make a difference and allow us to get through this pandemic to the other side. The border will open, and I think we're going to be in a real good spot fairly soon if we all continue to do the things that are asked of us, and we can put this behind us as a distant memory that we've all had to live through for the better part of 2 years. And so thank you for working with us. I know it's not been easy for a lot of folks. It's not been easy for us either. But I know you recognize that we're working together, trying to do what's best for the community, and we're almost in a better spot, and we will be very, very soon. So, Councillor, thank you for the opportunity to speak. To the residents who are here, thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to any questions people may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. So yeah, some really good things that we heard there. So what I'll do is, and again, just to maybe just reinforce that point, I think we've really been we're in a good position financially to be able to continue to stay the course with many of the investments and plans that we've had going forward. And so I think on that front, I would really like to just commend our administration for being able to identify all of the opportunities that were out there and advocating on our collective behalf to secure the funding that's been necessary in order for us to be able to stay the course on all of that. So great work there. We have some wonderful and incredible people that work for this city. And I one of the things that I'm very fortunate, I think, is that I find to be very fortunate about the job that I have in serving you all, is having the opportunity to work as closely as I do with all of these talented people that work at the city of Windsor. So with all of that, for I guess the moment you've all been waiting for, let's open this up to questions. So here's what I'd like to do. There are some questions that are in the question and answer queue, and we'll work on that. We'll work through those as well. For folks that want to ask a question, use the raise hand function on your at the bottom of the screen towards the right hand side. You raise your hand. What I'd like to do, if we do get several people in a queue, what I'll probably do is take 2 or 3 questions at a time consecutively, and then try to answer them all at once. So I don't see any hands up at this point. So maybe what I'll do is just go straight into there's a couple here in the Q&A. So the first one, what shall we do if we have any complaints against builders or their contractors? That is from Chima. So thank you for that question. So if there are some concerns that that folks might have with development that is happening in and around the where it is that they live or in any part of the community, one of the things that you can do, first of all, is to message me. Certainly, email is probably the best way to do it. And to raise those concerns, because sometimes it would depend on what the specific concern is. Sometimes it has to do with the impact that a particular development might be having on neighboring properties. So that might fall into a bylaw enforcement with our building folks. Maybe there's some issues with respect to what is being planned in terms of a development. That would certainly be more into the planning universe, engineering and design as well. So the short answer is it depends. But that's why folks like me are there, is to help to direct you. If you do have questions or concerns that you want to raise with respect to anything that the city is undertaking or are a part of, would be to sort of message me directly, or there's a 311, which is another great service that we offer, where folks can either phone 311. You can email 311@citywindsor.ca. As well, there's a mobile handheld app that I use all the time, to be honest. It's so you can download it onto your phone. If there's a specific concern that you'd want to raise, you can, the app actually works to sort of create a quote unquote call ticket that would allow the city to respond in whatever way they would need to respond to address the concern. So 311, contact the councillor directly. I think would be the best way to sort of address any of those types of concerns. Chima, thank you for your question. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. We'll start with Shannon. Your microphone's been unmuted, Shannon, so go ahead. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for all those great stats and the information. I have two questions, a question for the mayor and then a question for you, Councillor McKenzie. My question for Mayor Dilkens is how he plans to justify his request for this over $30 million waterfront canopy project, given that, we have a deficit. As Councillor McKenzie reported, Windsor has the highest poverty rate among children. Right now, we're dealing with COVID, and it's a time when we don't know what the expectations are as far as public gatherings, lockdowns, stuff like that. Windsor has an outrageous amount of homelessness, problems with addiction, unemployment, and now hearing about this problem with Chrysler going down to one shift in the spring. That's going to cause more problems with these things. We have problems with housing. And how do you justify spending over $30 million on this thing? I don't think that people are really thinking about going downtown when they don't have money or a place to live, when they're addicted to drugs and they're walking down Church Street and seeing someone smoking crack right on the street in front of them. So,
Shannon, thank you for your question.
and my question for you, Councillor McKenzie, is how you plan on voting on that issue. I want a specific answer. If you're going to support that or not support that canopy.
Thank you. Mayor Dilkens, if you want to proceed.
Yeah, Shannon, thanks for the question. So City Council asked and already approved a canopy design or a canopy concept for Festival Plaza. So administration went back, they hired the architect who came forward with the plan that you saw. And it is an expensive plan. And I think we should have options in terms of what that looks like. It doesn't have to be a $32 million improvement. It could be something different than that. But at the end of the day, the issues that you raised with respect to homelessness and addiction, all of those things are being worked on. No one is ignoring those at the expense of this. you still have to make improvements and investments in your city. And I think city council will have has the responsibility for sure to look at the spending, to decide what's right. And whether it should be a $10 million plan, a $20 million plan, a $30 million plan, a $40 million plan, or do nothing. And ultimately that will be the decision in front of city council, is how would you like to handle this? But administration did come back. They hired the architect that city council requested them to do, to prepare a plan, undertake public consultation, which was done. And the draft plan that you saw is the product prepared by the architect as requested by city council.
And Shannon, for my part, so there is as the mayor mentioned, we are following a process through the Central Riverfront Improvement Plan that sort of does indicate that we do want to see, and that the community has given us some feedback in terms of the types of amenities that we want to see in the scope of what those amenities might look like along the waterfront. So this isn't something that's sort of come out of nowhere. Having said that, I to the mayor's point, what I'll be looking for on Monday, and I can't say whether or not I'm going to support something or not, but I don't have the motion that we're going to deal with in front of me at this point. What I'll say is this, is that I think that we are a community that has made some nice investments on our waterfront, and I think that is a strength that we can continue to look at leveraging. The cost of that investment is definitely something that I am concerned about. And even to some extent, the scope, the size of it is something I'm also concerned about as well. I'm not going to say that it's a quote unquote, it's a hard no. It's not at this point for me. I'd like to see a range of options that could be made available for us, because what I do know about that space in the Festival Plaza is that once we do get through the pandemic and we are able to gather, that is already a very nice space. It's a strength in our community. And I look at what that potentially could be, and how we can make something that already is good better than what it already is. Addressing that's a super hot place, for example, in the middle of the summertime, even when there are events. So offering people the opportunity to have some relief while still enjoying the amenity and the cultural aspect of it, and promoting the arts with the investments like this is important for us to be able to do to support that community as well. So I know it's not the specific answer that you're hoping to get in terms of yes or no, but it's something that I'm going to want to see proceed with a range of options that can come back. We're not going to make a $32 million decision, I don't think, on Monday. What we're going to make is a decision to see whether or not we're going to continue to look at this canopy as a concept, and what it could potentially look like under a range of different options. And certainly, if you want to continue to communicate with me on this issue, I'll be happy to continue that discussion conversation with you, email or what, in whatever way you'd like to do that as we move forward. So having said that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask, we have two questions here. I have Carol and Rick Rose. We'll do one question after the other, and then we'll come back and we'll answer both of those questions after once we do that. So Carolyn, you're unmuted. So go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Carolyn, are you there? Okay, you know what? Maybe we'll come back to Carolyn. I see Mrs. Cudini. I'm glad that I knew you'd be here. So we'll go Mrs. Cudini, and then we'll try Rick Rose after that. So Mrs. Cudini, how are you this evening? And thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the Public Works Department for sending men here every month to fill in the potholes on our street. That's a big help. It saves a lot of wear and tear on our cars. And then I'd like to also mention, is the city going to do anything about the flooding on Woodlawn, specifically the 3300 block? The people there living there have called the city many, many times over the years, but nothing is ever done. And they cost them a lot of money every year and a lot of problems. Okay, having said that, my question is, did the people in Southwood Lakes have to have a petition to get the street lights? Or did the city just putting them in?
Okay, Mrs. Cudini, thank you for your questions. I'm going to take a question also from, let's see if we can get Carolyn unmuted, and we'll take Carolyn's question as well.
Hi, I hope you can hear me this time.
We can, Carolyn. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Kieran. I wonder if you could give us an update with the crimes happening in our neighborhood, and with the Windsor Police. Do they have a plan in place to get more action? I've noticed that within our Facebook group, we're not seeing as many posts about people getting, being victims of the crimes. However, last week I was a victim again for the second time in just a few months. So anyway, can you touch base on what's happening with the crime and how it's being addressed?
Absolutely. Carolyn, thank you for that question. I knew you were going to be here. I knew you were going to ask that, so I don't want to dive too deep into that in my opening comments, but and I'll get to that in a moment. So let's start with Mrs. Kudini. So let me start with the streetlights in Southwood Lakes. So the decorative streetlights. So I talked about the local improvement plan and process earlier in my presentation. So when that subdivision was built, that infrastructure, the decorative lights, were funded privately through the developers and then subsequently through the residents who purchased units in that subdivision. So the decorative streetlights were, as I said, privately financed when they were originally built. Now, part of the way that we handle that infrastructure that falls into the local improvement plan universe is that once the infrastructure is in place, we replace, quote unquote, like for like. So if for example, a sidewalk. Once the cement sidewalk is built, you're going to get, when it comes time to replace that infrastructure, you're going to get a new cement sidewalk in front of your home. It's not going to be dead. Now, that said, we might, if there's a small repair that needs to be made, it may not be the repair may not be at that level. But over the long term, if something is going to be formally replaced because the asset is deteriorated and it's time to replace that asset, we are going to replace like for like, and that is what we did. And the decision that we dealt with in the Southwood Lakes Southwood Lakes decorative lights situation. So we replaced like for like. It's been a longstanding city policy, and for my part, I did have some concerns about the costs. But when I looked at the way that the policy is applied across the entire community, it's applied fairly and it's applied evenly. And I would hate to see a situation where we opened up the proverbial Pandora's box and decided to downgrade infrastructure in a particular neighborhood. And then moving forward, there could be a range of different outcomes that could happen in I don't know, you name the street or the place in the community where a sidewalk that was previously concrete suddenly now is going to be downgraded to an asphalt sidewalk or some other type of surface that isn't at the same quality. And I don't think people would want to see that happening in their neighborhoods. And certainly, so applying that principle, and that's what council did, is we applied the like for like principle in Southwood Lakes. In terms of flooding on Woodlawn, there is Woodlawn and Parkwood are actually identified for local improvements that will see some of those infrastructure to be upgraded. And maybe I would ask someone from engineering. I don't want to put Mr. Nepsey on the spot. Perhaps whoever would like to speak. Okay, Mr. Nepsey, there you are. Just so it is in the local improvement plan. Parkwood and Woodlawn are both in the queue for some infrastructure investments, and I assume addressing some of the flooding issues would be a part of what we might undertake when we eventually do get to that.
Thank you, Councillor. Nice to see everybody tonight. I appreciate the question. Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. It would go through that local improvement plan, as you noted, and the replacement of sewers would have to be part of that, right? As part of that process. So, I can appreciate definitely the question, Shannon. Just for you to know, Shannon, I'm new here, so I'm learning the processes and the placements and the local improvement process. But as the councillor has noted, I'd be happy to move offline with you and discuss that further and how that process works.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Chris is just recently hired. Welcome as the new chief engineer for our city. One of the toughest jobs I think in any community. And Chris has been doing great work for us already. Trying to sort of, I've heard the term used in the past. Taking on jobs at senior levels like this, it's almost trying to absorb the amount of information that you need to absorb in the short period of time is like drinking from a fire hose. I think it was Mr. Raynar actually introduced me to that term, as he's also new in his role, and it really is. But I think Chris has done, and Chris comes from the town of Essex, where he served in a similar capacity, is already doing great work. I can assure you of all of that, and I think the city and the engineering department's in very good hands moving forward. But Mrs. Cudini, I will commit to circling back with you on maybe a more specific timeline with respect to when we might see some of those improvements move forward on Woodlawn. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Councillor, sorry, I just wanted to add, I know we just, we made the application for DMAP 4. Part of that application was for the RTB, the large scale project, which would help reduce the overall hydraulic grade line in the South Windsor area as well. So that indirectly, although not a sewer in front of the house, indirectly those improvements, if successful, and if that project is able to get grant money move forward, would indirectly help those residents and basement flooding that way. So there are not just direct in front of house improvements going on, but that sewer master plan, anything that's done on that large scale helps the community as a whole.
There's absolutely no question that systems improved at anywhere through the sort of where all of the stormwater is going to flow. Improvements along it help everybody, and that's why the mayor talked about the $5 billion of investment that we're making. Those investments are going to improve the drainage for the entire and the water management systems across the entire community. So not only are there neighborhood specific initiatives that we are aware of and need to move forward on, as you raised, Mrs. Cudini, but also we're across the entire community, we're taking these things very serious. This issue in particular extremely seriously. Carolyn, again, your question about community public safety, crime, and specifically in the Devonshire Heights neighborhood for folks that aren't aware, we did actually, and Carolyn, you've done really good work. I want to thank you publicly for your advocacy for the neighborhood and for folks who are dealing with these issues. And there's no doubt that Devonshire Heights for quite a while, when you looked at the neighborhood statistics in terms of property crime in particular, was one of the places that had that always sort of was on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of incidents that had been that were being reported. There are representatives here today from Windsor Police. I'm going to invite them to speak in just a moment. But what I do want to say is that we did, through Carolyn's advocacy, she launched a petition drive, and we were able to get a meeting with Mayor Dilkins, who was able to make time to hear these concerns, as well as Windsor Police. And what we and some residents, and we were able to identify some concerns, talk about some potential solutions that we could implement to address the challenges that we're having with respect to let's call it just public safety generally in that particular neighborhood. And I think folks know that there's a few issues that are driving some of those numbers. Certainly poverty across the community and addiction is part of what's happening there, and that's why I talk a lot about addressing those issues through the supports that we have available to us. And obviously policing is a part of this as well. What I can tell you is that there is a neighborhood strategy that has been implemented, and I'll invite someone from Windsor Police, whether it's Officer Crowley or Deputy Chief Belair, to speak to what it is specifically that we have implemented. But I will say there's been many conversations, and Windsor Police has responded. We do our neighborhood, and Devonshire Heights neighborhood, is an area of focus for the police. They're aware of some of the activity that's happening and are taking steps to address it, and allocating resources, a significant amount of resources, in order to address what's happening. So Deputy Chief Belair, I don't know if you wanted to add or if you'd like to add anything to what I've already said, but please, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure, I'll be brief in the interest of time for you, but if anyone has any follow-up questions, I'm an easy person to track down. So thank you, Councillor, for inviting myself and Superintendent Crowley here, who's with me. Carolyn, I believe was the name. I am sorry to hear that you were a victim of crime. I don't like to hear that. You know, I'm glad you have the courage to talk about it, and I'm already a fan, knowing that you are driving your community towards trying to make a safer place for everyone to live. I will touch. Councillor McKenzie talked about a sustained strategy. There was some time, some time ago, he did meet with some of the management level people at our organization that oversee some of our specialty teams, specifically the problem-oriented policing unit, which is known in the community as the POP unit, and our target-based property crimes team. So we did put a sustained strategy in place for quite a while in that particular neighborhood, and we are trending downward over the last, actually last couple of years. We're trending downward in overall crime statistics. What we do hope to do is build on that, like we were in some other neighborhoods where we had a neighborhood officer connecting with community groups, sitting down at round tables, being introduced to our uniformed patrol officers and our specialty teams out there to talk about specific problems. And this POP unit does bring with them connections with outreach, connections to support services, our mobile crisis rapid response team, where we have crisis experts working in that team to steer people down a different path. We do a lot of those interventions. At the moment, a lot of our resources have been reassigned to address a lot of the pandemic activity we have in the city. So when, the good news is that we have reduced crime statistics in that particular neighborhood. The better news I hope to give later is that we'll be able to release those people from some of these other draws on our resources right now, because we're a priority-based organization. And, we have to put people where the priority is in the moment. And, I'm more than happy to say that, we'll make sure that we assign the neighborhood officers back to where they belong when we have the ability to resource them the way we want to resource them. And they will sit down with your community and they will work with individuals in the community to try and make a safer community, as the councillor said. So again, myself and my people are easy to get a hold of, and we try to give the best answers we can to a community to help them out. Just to correct you there, councillor, it's Barry Horban does the crime prevention through environmental design, CEPTED, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. So him and actually a lot of our officers are trained, not quite to Barry's degree, but enough to go work in a neighborhood and do stuff. So that's a brief answer to what you asked. I'm available for more questions, and you can reach out to Windsor Police through your councillor, through Councillor McKenzie, or you can reach out to us through all the other avenues that we provide.
One thing that, Deputy Chief Belair, Jason, thank you so much. And apologies, Superintendent Jason Crowley, referring to as Officer Crowley. I apologize for missing your appropriate honorific, and two folks in the community who just do incredible work on all of our behalf. Really have a tremendous amount of respect for both of you and everyone at Windsor Police. Maybe this two things I want to build on that. So in addition to the policing resources that are being made available in the neighborhood to address the issues that are happening there, as I said, some crime is a symptom of a larger issue. And I think we have to recognize that it's not just up to the police to solve these problems. And we have as a council, we have a responsibility to address some of the social issues that do lead to higher incidences of crime. And we are doing those things by providing supports in the social services sector that I think are required. Certainly, we're not where we want to be, but we're moving in the right direction. And as Deputy Chief Belair noted, we are seeing a reduction in crime. And I have actually had an opportunity over recently to have a good look at some of the crime data, and it does bear out that there has been a steady decline. And Carolyn, since the meeting that we had and the implementation of the neighborhood strategy, that trend has continued. So I think that what's happening is we're having an impact, and we're having a positive impact on that front. We need to keep going. So a couple of things. One thing that I recently did, and I think that folks who live in the Devonshire Heights neighborhood know, is that we do have let's call it a challenge with respect to the hotels and the motels that are along that Division Road corridor. And I think that it's fair to say that to some extent that there's some that is or those places to some extent have are allowing or facilitating some of that activity that's not so positive in our neighborhood. What I've asked for our administration to do is to come back with a bylaw that would to promote a greater degree of public safety, which would be to ask for or to require the operators of these types of facilities to have a greater level of awareness of the activities that are happening within their facilities. This will be, I would expect that a proposal or the report will come forward in a number of months, hopefully maybe before the end of the new year. But if not early in 2022, where council would have the opportunity to consider enacting a bylaw that again would put a greater degree of responsibility on people operating facilities to be cognizant and vigilant about what's going on and to be more proactive with respect to promoting public safety in the neighborhoods where they're physically located. And so stay tuned on that one. Certainly when the report comes forward and the bylaw discussion is going to happen, my hope is that folks here who are attending the meeting will be interested in perhaps even delegating and supporting what it is that we're trying to achieve through that bylaw change. One last thing just on this front, I know we have representatives from the Safety Village. I mentioned before, Melissa Lozon, if she's here. Melissa, maybe you could just talk really briefly about how folks, the process that they can undertake to register as a neighborhood watch program in their neighborhood.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. So certainly, we definitely would be able to speak to that. We encourage anyone and any resident that is already taking these proactive approaches within their neighborhoods to formalize that approach and connect with us. So Chris Cookson is the coordinator of that program. It is housed at the Safety Village, and we would be happy to, I believe there was an opportunity to share screen. I think it would just give a very clear overview with how to establish your own watch. Very brief.
Are we able to give Melissa the opportunity to do that? Okay, I think we can.
If not, I think Chris may have it in front of him. Could maybe review it. It was provided previous to the meeting this evening.
You should be able to go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, sorry. It was the file was provided previous, so it would setting it up. That's okay. I would invite you, Chris, if you're able to speak to the process.
Okay, so maybe while Melissa's pulling that up, I'll deal with, we have a question here. So this is from George Simisak. This past summer, the drainage ditch that runs along the Dougal Parkway between Howard and 6th Concession was finally cleaned out from debris on the south side. Why was it not done also on the north side of the parkway? So I do know that that I would assume is part of the pre-drainage work that's happening in relation to the 6th Concession and North Talbot improvement project that is actually underway at this point. At some point, we are going to those ditches do need do have a regular maintenance schedule that I know our administration follows. What I'd ask you to do, George, is perhaps you could just remember to email, or if you could email me the question, I could probably get a specific answer as to when that ditch is going to, get its scheduled maintenance happening. So just email me offline or online in the next couple of days, and we'll see if I can get a timeline for you. Thank you for your question. Okay, and Melissa's now got the screen share going. Go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKenzie. I'm just going to say a few words regarding Neighborhood Watch. I guess the best way to start a new watch would be to Stevie, of course, please reach out to myself. I will put inside the in the chat or the question and answer my email and contact information, and then we can definitely go from there. But usually what we do is we have one person in charge of about 10 to 15 homes, and that's usually a manageable amount. And that one block captain would take care of the block and distribute crime reports. Usually what would happen from there is we would have a stepped head walk, which is like a environmental scan done of the neighborhood. Suggestions as far as porch lights, ring doorbells, security cams, anywhere from just like someone's away on vacation, kind of probably things you already do, but it establishes a formal watch in the area. But definitely the first step would be to reach out to myself, and I would take you through training and provide you with all the information you need to hand out to your neighbors.
Okay, that was Chris Cookson, folks. And please, if you are interested in establishing, thank you very much, Chris, for that information. And if you are interested in establishing a neighborhood watch, I'm certainly Chris is certainly the person to reach out to. But if you do have any further questions and want any assistance that I might be able to provide in helping you to set that up in your neighborhood, I'm more than happy to provide that support as well. Okay. So let's move on. I have Rick Rose, and we'll go to William after. So Rick, you're unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
I think I've hit both buttons. You can hear me?
We can hear you, Rick. Thank you for being here this evening.
You know what? And thank you to such an incredible group of counselors and officials and people. Thank you so much for doing this. It's greatly needed and much appreciated. I basically have two, no, that was mine.
Okay.
I have 2 points or 2 questions, and I'll start with number 2. I have been here a long time in Windsor, and I'm not originally from the city, so I've had the opportunity to see other cities, drive through them, and in my job, I have the opportunity to drive through this city quite a bit, quite often. I'm wondering if there's more that we can do to curtail the unabashed situation of people casually driving through red lights. I got to a point where I actually sat at a couple of corners and went through about 3 or 4 cycles of the red lights. And 3 out of 4 times, there were people just casually red light cruising through the red lights. Now, I also understand that we are getting into the program of the traffic cameras, the red light cameras, and I think that's a great start. But is there anything more that we can do? Windsor, by the way, is the highest or one of the highest as far as insurance rates for automobiles. We won't talk about flooding just now, but one of the highest rates in the province for insurance. And when I first moved to the city, I said, why do my insurance rates jump up so high so quickly? And they said, welcome to Windsor, was the insurance agent's answer. And then he explained to me there's actually more small little accidents in intersections here. And I went, wow, okay, well, I'll be careful. In moving my family down here, I had 3 children that were just 16, 17 years old, and my actually ex-wife. And I went home to them and said, listen, green means be real careful. Orange and red mean nothing. So defensive driving, guys, you know, when we finally get to the city, please be very careful. So the first point is there anything more that we can do about the red lights? My second question or point is, I am a realtor, been one for 31 years. Is there anything that we can do to be a little bit more proactive? And I'm actually, you know, obviously in tune with what's going on in real estate. The shortage of housing, the prices in the past 4 years have doubled or gone way up. And if you ask anybody on Facebook or wherever, if you get into a discussion, what basically they believe is it's all those people from the GTA coming down here and buying our homes and driving the prices up, which is absolutely not true. It's the true answer is a supply and demand situation. I would like to see this city be on the forefront in Canada, or at least Ontario, of doing things that other cities could follow. One example is maybe getting rid of a little bit of the red tape as far as building new homes, but certainly in changing single family residential into more granny flats, downstairs, basement apartments, making it easier to do that. That would actually, if we did that to 500 units, that would create an extra 500 rental units. So is there anything that we could get creative with? And if you wanted to start a committee, I'd be happy to join that or head it. I do have a lot of experience. We've never met, but be happy to discuss that with you also at some point. But is there anything that the housing department, the mayor, you could do to address the situation? And I don't mean with the typical things that people think of. I mean, the things that really are the truth and really will help that we're not thinking of right now. And there's tons of those things that we're not doing right now that could be done and could be done easily and at no cost.
Rick, thank you for that question. I'll get to that in just a moment. And I see William going to unmute. William, go ahead, ask your question. Welcome, and how are you this evening? I see you're still muted. Let's see if I can.
All right, do you hear me now?
We hear you, William.
All right, good evening, Councillor McKenzie, your mayor, and members of the administration. My question relates to Ward 9, which includes the airport property, and focuses on the Sandwich South Master Servicing Plan, which is currently being presented as part of the PIC2 consultation session. The major issue going forward is we're talking about the stormwater system and the sewer plan, which is controlled by the revised upcoming floodplain mapping of 1985 and the Upper Little River Stormwater Management Corridor, which are still both not complete. And it seems that these two plans will be directly controlling all the other plans, as well as the Lausanne Parkway, and will result in further discussions and updates. These two plans define the elements which directs the preferred option has been selected by the Stormwater Management Committee that defines the district plan of linear channeled wet ponds that will have permanent water built in them in the new increased corridor size of 325 meters. The key question that seems to be applied on this is that in the selection of this option, they propose to provide a centralized location or properties to reduce the number of ponds that will service one or more properties or the catchment areas. So basically, you're isolating the number of areas and properties that will be needed to support the system, thereby allowing maximum development, reducing number of pumping stations, and further maintenance costs down the road to the city. But the problem is we haven't been told how much land will be required based on their chosen selection, as well as the amount of land and the values that will be applied. These lands have been selected as sacrificial lands that will not be permitted to develop, while others will be permitted to develop and obtain the benefits, which also include the airport. So the question that's being asked is, how is the cost of these lands, which should also include additional compensation to the selected landowners, received to offset the loss of not being permitted to develop? So that is the question, and I'd like your view on the intention of when we speak of compensation and the lands that will be restricted from development, how will that value be calculated? while others will be able to benefit from development. So far, I haven't received any of those correspondence. I've submitted numerous responses and copied all council members, including the mayor, with questions that seem to be lacking in being supplied. That's my first question. The second question relates again back to the two key floodplain mappings, as well as the Upper Little River, and the fact that these two will be directing what the other plans in the Sandwich South District will need to change or alter. And the question comes back to the Lausanne Parkway, which obviously is affected by the corridor size, okay? And have been informed by that team that is not open for discussion, which I'm very concerned because the corridor controls the flood locations of the Lausanne Parkway, which was moved to the west. So hopefully some answers can be directed that, please. And thank you.
Bill, thank you for your question. So a lot of technical pieces there. Maybe what I'll ask is, let me just start with a comment. So the Upper Little River floodplain or flood management plan is still a work in progress, as you indicate. And certainly we're not at a point at this currently where I think where perhaps the answer to your question might lie at this point. So I think that's the short answer that we're moving through it. I can tell you that I had meetings just this week with folks who are sort of in our administration who are sort of leading the process or managing that process of the Sandwich South development piece. And it's a massive undertaking, and certainly a massive undertaking that we need to make sure that we get right, and we get it right the first time. And water management is a critical component of all of that. And certainly, you know, I personally would rather that we take our time, make sure we get everything right, so that we don't not only not contribute to a problem that we already have in the city with respect to water management, but actually through the development that we're going to be undertaking in the development that will be undertaken in that whole area is done in such a way that actually from an overall perspective can even potentially improve the water management system. But I'll invite, I'm not sure who from administration, maybe I'd invite Mr. Raynar just to comment on some of the pieces that Mr. Ballas brought forward.
Thanks very much, Councillor, and thanks very much, William, for the question. We absolutely are interested in all of those components that you've raised, and are excited to continue to work on them. I have to apologize, I'm not familiar with the correspondence that you've had with council members, and so happy to take that part offline. But the compensation value is not something that I can answer in the next kind of 2 or 3 minutes. As you know, it's pretty complicated, but happy to chat offline about it. And we are, in fact, I spoke with Urca just this week about how we can continue to work together on the South Sandwich lands, particularly around that flood mapping. So happy to talk more, but that's all I can provide at this point, Councillor.
Jason, thank you. So there, Mr. Ballas, the opportunity to raise some of these issues with the CAO now. Mr. Rose, Rick, thank you. Some really good questions there. So let's start with, you talked about the, let's start with the red lights and people running red lights. Yes, it is an issue in our community. In fact, you already referenced the fact that council is going to be moving forward with a red light cameras at intersections, at certain intersections across the city. So it's my hope that once folks become aware that there's that capability that's now been introduced into the city, that they'll drive with a little bit more care and circumspection, if you will, when you know, going from anywhere that they're going, and they should always do their best to drive safely. But certainly there's a hope amongst all of us in administration and council that this will be a proven effective tool that we can improve the situation to some extent. And maybe I'll invite Shauna Boakes from our traffic management division to be able to sort of maybe discuss other measures that we could potentially consider that that can address the issue of folks going through intersections on the red. Shauna?
Hi, good evening rather. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The red light cameras are coming online. We're hoping within the next month. We're just waiting for the contractors to finish their build, and we'll be getting those turned on. With respect to some of the other measures that we're taking, there's not a lot that we can do directly at the intersections, but if we can do measures around the intersections, one of the other programs that Ontario has implemented is the automated speed enforcement. It's not something we've brought back to council yet. We're still waiting for reports from other municipalities to gauge the effectiveness in theirs. But for all intent and purposes, we've heard very good things so far. And then the traffic calming efforts that we're making in between on some of the upcoming work that transportation planning is doing with arterial roads, with the councillors in their specific wards. All of these things go to making safety priority on our roads, lowering speeds, and in turn, hopefully lowering the speeds at the intersections, which will hopefully translate into better, following the rules at those intersections. So that's what I can provide at this time.
Shauna, thank you for that. I hope that addresses some of your questions, at least to some extent, Mr. Rose. And then with respect to housing, so a couple of things there, and I will invite Debbie Cerconi, the Director of Housing, to chime in on some of this. But there are some of the suggestions that you raised in your question, for example, the additional dwelling units. There is, in fact, the City of Windsor has, in fact, there's a number of communities across Ontario that have brought forward new bylaws that have allowed for, and frankly, it may be a good term to just apply to it without getting into all of the technicalities of it, relax some of the requirements from a building code perspective in order for folks to be able to add capacity in their own homes. So that's something that is already being undertaken. The other thing, and I think you're quite right. When you talk about the market and the conditions in the market, you're a professional in the real estate sector, and I'm glad that you highlighted that it's not just folks from outside of the community coming in, but there is demand. And what is actually happening is that I think it'd be fair to say, on the building permit side of things, that 2020 was as busy a year in terms of permits and permit applications and permit approvals as we've seen in many years before that. And 2019 was one of the busiest years that we've had in 10 years as well. So what is happening is the supply side is starting to catch up to the price side, or to the demand side, if you will, and we do see a tremendous amount of development that's happening all across the city, and frankly, including in our ward. And it's actually something that raises some other issues that are happening. I've talked about already the development that we're seeing along the Howard Avenue corridor, and I'm very pleased to see that there's folks want to live in Ward 9, folks want to invest in the city of Windsor and live in the city of Windsor. That's what we're seeing developers in terms of accommodating the demand by bringing all these units online. But we definitely need to make the appropriate investments to support that with the infrastructure that would be required. So that's one of the challenges that I find that we're having. We're building, we recognize that there is a need for housing, and there's a lot of really exciting and interesting projects that are happening across the city. We have implemented a number of different investment incentive packages, CIPs, community improvement plans, to promote investments, in particular parts of the city where we want to see infill happen, and frankly, developers are leveraging those programs. So it does take a while. We can't just sort of snap our fingers and catch up to the demand. And certainly, the other challenge that we had in the Windsor market, as you know, Windsor for a long time was one of the most affordable housing markets in all of Canada. There's to some extent we're catching up to the rest of the country with respect to housing prices in the community. And it definitely is having an impact in terms of people being able to have access to affordable housing, and council does we'll have the opportunity to consider some ways to promote greater access to affordable housing in the not too distant future. I can assure you of that. In terms of your own involvement, the City of Windsor, and I'd invite you to apply for the next term of council, does have a city housing and homeless advisory committee. It's filled with some very astute minds, and folks are very aware of the housing issues that exist in our community. And the role of the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee is essentially to advise council on different measures that it could adopt to address the issues that you raised in terms of housing shortages. I will invite Mr. Coney to chime in though on some of the other things that we're doing to address housing in the City of Windsor. Debbie?
Thank you, Councillor. Good evening, everyone. Yes, confirming that we do have an ADU policy that Council passed a couple of years ago. My colleagues in building and planning can provide more specifics on the uptake for that. We do and have offered in the past an incentive program for community members who wish to add ADUs that will offer some funding to assist for them to add an ADU to their property. And we will be adding that program in the future. So certainly Council has recognized the importance of adding additional dwelling units to the housing stock as it relates to increasing affordability in the community. So that's one of the strategies. And obviously we have recognized the need. There is a great deal of expansion happening through various sources. The Meadowbrook project that is being built on the east end of the city with 145 affordable units will be up and running in August of next year. And those options will be available for people that qualify who need affordable housing units. We are also expanding and have been for a number of years housing allowances or housing subsidies through upper levels of government funding. And those are subsidies that are provided directly to households who need a little bit of help with their monthly housing costs, and they help to reduce those costs. We do have other programs that I could speak to if you would like to reach out to me. My information is on the website, and I'd be happy to speak to you about them.
Thank you, Debbie, and Rick, thank you for your questions. I'm going to move forward here. I see Gordon has a question. He's actually, Gordon, you put it in the chat, so I'm just going to read the question that you've typed out for us. I'm not sure if sorry. My question is in regards to the downtown neighborhood now known as River West, and what was once a street full of decades-long residents keeping up family homes, and in only recent years has become a street of homes being regularly purchased for more than what they are worth, only to be turned into rooming houses. I doubt that the city is even aware of this, and I wonder whether such homes are even legal, as I would doubt that the owners have gotten permits to turn family homes into rooming homes. So there's a few things there to unpack, and I will turn this over at some point to I would assume maybe Mr. Abs could address some of the questions that are some of the issues that are raised in the question there. Number one, we just did pass a pilot program, it's a rental registry license program where we're asking, it's basically an enforcement tool and a regulatory tool that we've put in place so that folks who do want to and are sort of putting product out there into the rental market for housing would be they have to register on their own, but would be subject to a regime, a licensing regime, which would give us some enforcement power to make sure that there's compliance with the building code regulations and all of the regulations that they would need to follow if they're going to be providing housing in the rental market. So there is a program in place that council has passed to address some of the challenges that we're seeing in that space. Additionally, now, and what you're talking, the city would certainly be aware of any home that was going to be undertaking a rezoning and going from a single unit dwelling and trying to be converted into a multi-residential or a rooming house of sorts or a boarding house of sorts. Certainly there's folks that are undertaking those processes sort of quote unquote under the radar, and that's why we do have bylaw enforcement officers, and council did recently approve additional supports and found some efficiencies that we can do on the enforcement front there. But also for folks that are looking to go through the formal process to convert a particular type of dwelling into another type of dwelling, that has to go through a rezoning process that's very robust. It's vetted through the standing committee, the Development and Heritage Committee as well, and then it comes to the full council for final approval. It's whenever we get a rezoning application, they are highly scrutinized by our administration. It's a very onerous process to be able to go through that. Having said that, and this is why council has acted on this front, we recognize that there are some folks who are providing housing in that rental market that aren't following the rules. Frankly, and that's why council has acted and taken and put some additional supports and as I said, enforcement tools in place in order for us to be able to address some of those let's call it challenges in the community. And maybe I would ask I guess Mr. Abbs or somebody from planning maybe just to sort of unpack a little bit more succinctly the zoning process and and there might be somebody from bylaw enforcement who might want to address maybe Mr. Tetler on the rental registry piece.
Thanks, Kieran. Your answer was really good. So there isn't a whole bunch I can add to that. What I will add, though, is that lodging houses and rooming houses are viable forms of housing, and they do fulfill a need in the market. They do fulfill a place in that market. Every house or every dwelling isn't going to be, or everyone isn't going to live in your standard apartment or your standard single detached dwelling. So those are the types of choices that we have to provide throughout, that we have to provide for everyone that's going to be living within the city. Secondly, when it comes to a zoning bylaw amendment, Councillor McKenzie is correct in saying that there is a very robust process, and that when a property goes through that zoning process, it is a public process as well, and that people that live within a certain distance of the area or actually anyone within the city can provide comment to the planning department, to the standing committee, and to council, and have their opportunity to tell us what they think should happen on that site. So there are opportunities for people to make their concerns known or their support known for any particular application that you see. If someone has a specific concern regarding an area or a property that's being redeveloped, and they think it's being redeveloped illegally, and I would then say the first thing to do would be to contact 311 and make that report to 311, either by phone or online. And then at that point, the city would investigate, just as we do any other complaint. If it is an issue, someone could eventually be charged under the zoning bylaw. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. It does happen from time to time. So make sure that if you see something that isn't happening, or that's happening in a way that you don't think that it should be, make sure that 311 knows about that, and they will direct that appropriately. Thanks.
Jim, thank you very much for that. Does anyone want to speak to the rental licensing pilot? I'm not sure if it would. I'll just throw it out there if someone from administration wants to chime in on that.
Councillor McKenzie, it's Bill Tetler from Bylaw. I can add a few comments to the rental housing.
Thanks, Bill.
City Council directed administration to create framework for a 2-year pilot project, focusing on wards 1 and 2 for rental housing. the feedback survey was just launched today at citywindsor.ca, and that is open until November 9th for public consultation, which I think is a very important part of the process. There is an executive committee that's working on this. The plan is to have that report, I believe, in front of City Council somewhere around February of 2022, and then a decision made from there to move forward.
Thank you, Bill. Again, I guess maybe Gordon, to your question, taking that issue very, very seriously. There's a safety issue and a very serious one that's involved in terms of the type of space that's being provided for people who are in the rental market. And councils recognize that there's some folks that are being that aren't acting in the best interests of, let's just say, the community generally, or the people that they're looking to serve. Councils recognize that and taken some steps to address that issue. And certainly what it will take, because there are some very serious, significant challenges in terms of enforcing in this space, is for people to be proactive with in terms of their own sort of their own advocacy, as well as even advocacy for their neighbors, especially for folks who are in a more vulnerable situations. So, but the city is certainly responding as well. I'm going to take one more question, and maybe I'll go back to Ms. Boakes. There's a question from Mr. Hanna asking about the red light cameras. So the funds that would be collected for the, and I remember that this was dealt with in the report when we first dealt with it. The funds that would be collected through any offenses that are generated through the red light camera program. The question here is, will all the red light camera cash be going to the Toronto tech firm? Maybe we could just pan back a little bit and ask, what happens with the revenue that's collected with respect to the actually almost let's say traffic offenses generally, but this program specifically.
Absolutely. Specifically, I can speak directly to the red light camera program. I'm not sure about the other ones. We'd have to get someone else to speak to those. But red light cameras, there's a small charge that on each one of the tickets that goes back to the ministry. The rest of the funding all comes to the city. So the funding that we get will go towards paying for the cameras themselves, and then the remainder of the funding is the cities to do with as they wish. I do believe a couple councillors had asked a question regarding whether or not that funding could go towards traffic calming or traffic control related purposes. And obviously within the first year, we'll be just tracking that funding to find out how much there is once it all comes in. And then we can go from there to see where that actually gets distributed.
Shauna, thanks for that. Mr. Hanna, I hope that answers your question. So I'm seeing no more hands raised, and we are at now 7:41 on my clock. We were scheduled tentatively for an hour. We're an hour and 40 minutes, so we're getting into close to the 2-hour range. I see no more questions. So what I'd like to do now is just to thank everybody. I'll start with administration, the mayor, Mr. Rayner, and the entire administration, as well as representatives from Windsor Police and the Safety Village, everyone who's here to support this ward meeting and to answer questions that all of you have brought forward, and to be available to answer questions in case they were called upon to respond to something that you were concerned about. I really do appreciate the work that you've done to this evening, and the work that you do for the community every day. And to all of the folks who are attending here this evening, thank you so much for coming to this meeting, for your engagement, for listening, and it really is my deep pleasure and honor to be able to serve the community in this capacity. I do thank all of you for the feedback that I get on a regular basis about what we can do to improve our community, and this is all part of that. So certainly I'll be reflecting on what it is that we talked about here today and what we can do to do even better in terms of addressing the challenges that are in front of us as we continue to move forward. Thank you, everybody, and I hope folks have a wonderful evening, and we'll hope to see you soon. Good night.